September 2000, the United Nations committed world leaders to a declaration known as the Millennium Development Goals (MDGs), with measurable targets and clear deadlines for improving the world's poorest people by 2015. Today, however, that has clearly been superseded by a post-development agenda known as the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs). This new set of goals were adopted at the 70th session of the United Nations Summit in New York in 2015 as part of efforts to consolidate and, of course, address the unfinished business of the Millennium Development Goals. The SDGs target 17 areas that are built on past achievements. They are broader, deeper, and far more ambitious in scope when compared with the 8 MDGs. The goals and targets will stimulate action from the United Nations countries over the next 15 years in what is now known as 2030 Agenda. Hello there and welcome. This is Agenda 2030, a program designed to capture and critically examine Nigeria's effort towards the attainment of the SDGs. I am Toyin Nkamiang John. The core objectives of the 17 SDGs are to end poverty and hunger, protect the planet from degradation, foster peace, realize human rights while trying to balance the 3 dimensions of development, that is economic, social, and environmental. As part of the United Nations member state that adopted the post-2015 development agenda, Nigeria is not left out of the opportunity to be part of and implement this plan of action. Back home, President Muhammadu Buhari has reaffirmed his absolute commitment to the successful implementation of the SDGs. On today's program, we bring you an overview of the Sustainable Development Goals, a quick review of what Nigeria has been doing since it was adopted. We will also bring you reports from the last national consultation on the voluntary report. Stay with us. As the quest to attain the Sustainable Development Goals continue to gain traction in Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari has reiterated his resolve to deploy the SDGs to the development interest of all Nigerians. We bring you the President's remark after the last United Nations General Assembly, where he called for concrete actions by all stakeholders.
Indeed, in Nigeria, we are providing relief and humanitarian assistance to millions in internally displaced camps and those afflicted by terrorism, drought, floods, and other natural disasters. In the last year, the international community came together to focus on the need for gender equality, youth empowerment, social inclusion, and the promotion of education, creativity, and innovation. The frontiers of good governance, democracy, including holding free and fair elections, and the enthronement of the rule of law are expanding everywhere, especially in Africa. We shall also cooperate in addressing the growing transnational crimes such as forced labor, modern-day slavery, human trafficking, and cyber crime. Mr. President, I end my remarks by reiterating Nigeria's abiding commitment to the foundational principles and goals of the United Nations. Since our admission as a member state in 1960, we have always participated in all efforts to bring about global peace, security, and development. Nigeria will continue to support the United Nations in all its efforts, including the attainment of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I thank you.
And that was the remark by President Muhammadu Buhari, where he reiterated his commitment to the implementation of the SDGs. It's now time to bring you some of the reports emanating from the implementation of the SDGs across the country. In a bid to enhance the existing partnership with the development partners in support of the SDGs implementation in Nigeria, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has inaugurated the SDGs Donors Partnership Forum. Here is a report presented from Agenda 2030 Studios.
The forum is aimed at revitalizing and strengthening the capacity of the existing institution, as well as mobilizing resources among other objectives. Similarly, the Vice President has also inaugurated the Private Sector Advisory Group, as well as the Presidential Council on SDGs. The Council has among its members governors, lawmakers, ministers, captains of industries, and members of the civil societies. At the event, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo noted that the aim of the forum was for governance and the people of Nigeria to defeat extreme poverty and foster sustainable development. The Vice President noted that there was the tendency for global programs such as the SDGs to become mere aspirations based on past experiences. He, however, stated that the government would take all necessary actions to ensure that the implementation of the framework translates into a huge success in Nigeria.
Social investment is a key pillar of our economic recovery and growth plan. There is no way of fighting poverty and its many causes and implications without social safety nets in one form or the other. It explains why we believe that eradicating corruption is central to eradicating extreme poverty. We cannot allow theft of public resources and speak of sustainable development.
The work of the Donor Partnership Forum on Sustainable Development being inaugurated today will make this effort to scale. This will enhance efficiency of resources, curb project duplication, and foster aid effectiveness. This forum will encourage policy coherence with the attendant alignment of donors' intervention with government medium and long-term development plan.
The 2030 Agenda commits all countries and stakeholders to work together to promote sustained and inclusive economic growth, social development, environmental protection, rule of law and justice, while leaving no one behind. The scale and ambition of this new universal agenda calls for an integrated approach to sustainable development and collective action at all levels.
At the event, which took place at the Presidential Villa, Abuja, Professor Yemi Osinbajo seized the opportunity to call on the elite to cater for the needs of the poor and vulnerable people to enable them live decent life.
Meanwhile, as part of its effort to prevent the drawbacks found with the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals in Nigeria, the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals has mobilized 400 core members across the country to champion the implementation of the SDGs in the country.
According to the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, Princess Adejoke Orelokpe Adefulire, while giving insights after the launch of the SDGs champion in Kefi, Nasarawa State, she noted that the idea is to take the SDGs to the young and growing generation to create awareness and to boost their participation as Nigeria intensifies efforts to attain the goals and targets. She said one of the major challenges with the implementation of the MDGs was the inability of the communities to take ownership of the projects cited in their localities. To this end, the 400 core members are expected to assist in advocacy and sensitization of the SDGs across the 36 states and the 774 local government areas of the Federation. Princess Orelokpe Adefulire stated that the core members will be the representative of the Office on SDGs, urging them to be a voice for the weak and report any cases of abuse that they see in their communities of service.
This group of core members will be acting as a mouthpiece for the Office of Senior Special Assistant to the President on behalf of Mr. President on Sustainable Development, on the advocacy and sensitization of sustainable development activities at the 36 states and 774 local governments of Nigeria. It is instructive to note that the National Youth Service Corps, with a nationwide spread, played a major role in galvanizing Nigeria to participate in the Millennium Development Goals and was the forefront for the collation of data which resulted in the new global agenda for development. The Sustainable Development Goals. It is therefore only logical for the Office of National Youth Service Corps to evolve its partnership using core members to drive the Sustainable Development Goals advocacy, since the development goals seek to complete the unfinished business of MDG.
The ceremony was organized by the Office of the Senior Special Assistant on SDGs in collaboration with the National Youth Service Corps, with the theme, Youth Taking Action to Implement the 2030 Agenda. The SDGs is currently at the centerpiece of the current Global Development Agenda, which envisages a world free from poverty and deprivation, where the fundamental conditions for human survival are safeguarded. The vision, which was endorsed by 189 nations in New York in September 2015, is expected to guide nations, international organizations, private sector, civil society, and governments in all countries in the shared pursuit of a healthier world and a better tomorrow.
In a bid to equip the youth with life skills that will aid their economic advancement, the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals embarked on a digital skills training for the empowerment of 125,000 youths across the Federation.
The training, which held in all senatorial districts across the country, was carried out in collaboration with Google through its vendor, Mind the Gap. The aim of this program is to leverage on technology in order to sustain innovation as well as deploy the knowledge to improve themselves and the economy of the country.
Today, technology has opened mind-boggling opportunities in commerce, in science, and medicine, and practically all aspects of human endeavor. Today, technology has created space for millions of new business opportunities. Just by being able to virtually connect millions of people, the internet has changed the business landscape and empowered anyone with great ideas and any smart handheld device. For me, the most fascinating new realities are the so-called disruptive technologies. Innovations which disrupt or upset existing markets, displacing established market leaders by creating new markets of their own. Of these technologies, the most interesting are those that are called the network orchestrators. These companies that just simply take advantage of the business environments that already exist. They have no inventories of their own, no assets of their own. All they do is create a new layer of business through technology.
The Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, Princess Adejoke Orelokpe Adefolire, stated government's readiness to ensure that the obvious gap that hitherto existed with corresponding snag in the wheel of progress was closed.
In order to attain sustainable development in Nigeria and other parts of the world, youth empowerment must remain the focus of our long and medium-term development strategy. SDG Goal 8 briefly put it in the perspective. It calls on countries to promote full, productive employment and decent work for all. It requires that we target investment in skill development of the youth population in order to enhance their productivities in the labor market. This has become imperative as the youth population expands in Nigeria.
It has in its theme diversifying the nation's economy, enabling youth through digital skills training. The digital skills training will put the youth in better stead to run and grow their businesses more efficiently, as well as give them competitive advantage at the global level. Princess Orelokpe Adefolire maintained that this is not just a training exercise, but an empowerment with the tool of life.
The last high-level political forum of the United Nations ECOSOC offered an opportunity for selected countries to present their progress report on the implementation of the SDGs to the United Nations. Nigeria was among the selected countries, with the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals SDGs, Princess Adejoke Orelope Adefulire, presenting the report on behalf of the country.
With barely 2 years into the implementation of the SDGs, the practices put in place in Nigeria have attracted the attention of the United Nations and the global community. This has prompted the invitation of the country to share her experiences with other countries. The Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, Princess Adejoke Orelope Adefulire, presented the Progress and Status Report on behalf of President Muhammadu Buhari on the implementation of the SDGs in the country to the high-level political forum of the United Nations. Princess Orelope Adefulire reiterated Nigeria's commitment and willingness to pursue with increased vigor the core targets of the global agenda.
The Nigerian government, therefore, has, however, taken a number of steps, which I will quickly reflect on. The first logical step taken was to identify the target, the poor and vulnerable, by developing a national social investment project. The social investment program is targeted at the poor and vulnerable with an attendant national social register, my ward survey, which has just been mentioned, to get the poor, because the poor and the needy, the vulnerable are at the receiving end. We also develop a homegrown school feeding. We are feeding the school children 1 meal a day. And government also introduced enterprise empowerment program to provide financial support to traders, market women, cooperative groups, women farmers, artisans, as well as introduction of medium, small, and micro enterprise. The Empower program, which was designed to create youth employment and life skill development program for the youth, is also ongoing. We also have vocational training for the grassroots women. For us, we believe that the grassroots women are in their numbers, and this will reduce domestic violence in our homes and abuse. It also curbs dependency amongst our women, and it also helps our women to get their children to school.
The best practices forms part of Nigeria's voluntary national review on the implementation of the agenda, and which was laid at the high-level political forum in New York. The forum, under the auspices of the UN ECOSOC, provides a platform for partnership and review amongst groups and relevant high-level international stakeholders.
In a bid to ensure that the weak and vulnerable in the society are guaranteed access to justice always, the federal government has entered into a strategic partnership with the Nigeria Bar Association. At the ceremony for the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding, which held at the Yaradua Center in Abuja, the partners gave assurances that the move will also help to accelerate efforts towards the attainment of Goals 10, 16, and 17, with a focus on access to justice, peace, inequality, inclusive society, and partnership for sustainable development. The last United Nations Day celebration in Nigeria provided a platform for stakeholders to restate commitment to achieving the SDGs. We have the report.
With the theme, Taking Concrete Action for the Sustainable Development Goals, stakeholders who gathered at the Rotunda Hall of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs resolved to continue to deploy pro-poor policies, programs and projects in a bid to lift the vulnerable out of poverty while ensuring the protection of the planet. In her address, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, Princess Adejoke Orelope Adefulire, reaffirmed the commitment of President Muhammadu Buhari to ensure that no one is left behind as Nigeria seeks to attain the Sustainable Development Goals.
The Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals collaborates closely with the United Nations control team in Nigeria to implement the 2030 agenda. This has enabled us to gain traction as we are inspired by the drive to jointly mainstream SDG for the benefit of the people of Nigeria.
In his remarks, the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator in Nigeria, Edward Kalon, urged stakeholders to seize the opportunity offered by the SDGs to deliver sustainable development to the people.
We therefore urge, and I call on policymakers today and development partners in Nigeria to go beyond business as usual to what I call business unusual approach to implement the SDGs and try to see how we can incorporate both the letter and spirit of Agenda 2030 as well as the African Union Commission Agenda 2063 into policies, plans, and legislation at both federal and state level.
The celebration also witnessed the unveiling of the SDGs ambassadors with a charge to continue to raise awareness for the goals. One of the highlights of the event was presentation by the children.
And that's the news from recent developments. Agenda 2030 continues in just a moment. Do stay with us. Away from that, it is now time to bring to you our quiz segment. On this segment, we will be bringing to our audience at home and respondents on the street questions related to the SDGs. Selected winners from among the participants will be invited to the Agenda 2030 studios for the live quiz segment, from where the overall winner and the runners-up will be entitled to our special prizes.
How many goals are there in the SDG?
There are 17 goals. Before now, I wouldn't know SDG, I'm sorry to say that. But I know about MDG, which is Millennium Development Goals.
The meaning of SDG, we've heard about it at least earlier in this administration.
I really cannot tell, as I don't know so much about it.
Actually, I don't know.
Actually, no. Yeah.
I think it's about 7 or 17 or so, you know.
And for our question for the week, what is the full meaning of SDGs and when was it adopted? Send your answers to the number and email on your screen. And that's our package for the week. Remember, you can always be part of this program by following us on all our social media platforms on your screen and drop your comments. You can also watch this program on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being part of this program this week. We will see you again next week. I am Toyin Nkamiang John saying have a great new week.